Morning, church. So as you might have gathered, I'm Kevin and this is Chantelle. We also have two 8-year-old boys, Samuel and Elliot, and this is our story over the last 10 years, that we've been married for 10 years, and just how God has been with us in that journey. Now, originally our plan was that we would just speak from the heart, but we realized also we don't want to either waffle on or cut out very important parts. So for a large majority, we are going to be just reading through what we have prepared.
Hi, everyone. Okay, yes, as Kevin said, so sleep deprivation plays a little bit of a role in that. I just thought I'd go way off topic. Okay, so to start off, when Kevin told me that we'd be sharing our testimony, I was pretty excited, kind of when you realize that you can share, when you've had a few hard years and you realize you can share and people can commiserate with you and understand what's been going on. So I was pretty excited. That was where my heart was at. And then about 2 weeks ago, Kevin and I were chatting through our testimony, and Kevin said, I've been thinking about what the theme or the main focus of our testimony should be, and I think it should be all about how God goes before us and continues to go before us. And my heart changed. And I couldn't have agreed more with that theme. So we'll share a little bit of our story, but this testimony isn't about our story. It's about the one who wrote our story. We hope that this is the part you remember, the part you carry home in your hearts this morning. So to start off with our story, we met and got married later in life, and we decided that we kind of wanted to wait about a year before starting a family. People thought we were crazy, like, what if you struggle? We said we want to wait a year. So at the end of 2014, the year was just about done, and we decided to start planning for a family in Jan 2015. After the Christmas carol service in 2014, a friend's mom started having a very random conversation with me about twins. After which, she told me that she would pray for me to have twins. I told her not to, in the nicest way possible. I have never wanted twins. I have worked with children my whole life. It was not something I wanted or fantasized about. So I never mentioned this conversation to Kevin. I just thought it was a random event. At the beginning of January 2015, I asked two of my closest friends and prayer partners to pray with us as we were wanting to start a family. In mid-Jan, we went to a birthday celebration for one of these friends. And this particular friend asked me how things were going. I told her that I wasn't expecting yet, after which she looked right at me and she said, "When I look at you, I just see twins." My jaw dropped and I didn't quite know what to say. So when we got in the car after that birthday celebration, I told Kevin about both the conversations that had happened. He agreed that it was weird, but we put it down to a strange coincidence. About a week later, his parents' friends were down in Cape Town from Zim and were now heading back to Zim and wanted to know if there was anything that Kevin would like to send back with them for his parents. There was something. So he met with them for lunch. I wasn't with. In the midst of the conversation with them, the lady looks at Kevin after asking how our marriage is going, and she said, "So, are you going to have twins?" Exactly those words. Random conversation. So he got in his car and he phoned me and he said, "So I think maybe we might be having twins." So after a positive pregnancy test in February and a checkup at the gynae at 8 weeks, it was confirmed that we were expecting twins. However, we were also told not to get too excited, as very often one twin doesn't survive. We knew then that God had prepared us for this exact moment. I looked at the gynae and I told him that it was okay and that both of them were going to survive. And they did, because that is what God planned to happen, even before they were conceived.
So another time that we saw God's provision and planning in our lives, when the boys were about 2 years of age. We had gone for a walk in the neighborhood. Samuel hadn't been feeling so well, so as a result, I kind of carried him the last little bit. And we met up with a friend, a neighbor, who also had been kind of walking around, pretty close to where our house was. Now, whilst mid-conversation, Samuel actually started convulsing. So we later realized that this was a febrile seizure because he hadn't been well. But in that moment, it is a terrifying thing. We saw God's provision. In having a trustworthy neighbor to take care of Elliot whilst we rushed off to the ER and providing us with a medical facility just down the road. And when one thinks of getting a house, you never think, okay, let's find it close to a medical facility. It's usually, let's find one close to a school so our kids can get into that school. But as you'll realize later, being close to a hospital is good for us. So the next event took place on the 20th of July, 2019. Now, I'd taken up the challenge of participating in a bike race, a mountain bike race with Basil and another friend. There might be a trend between bicycles and accidents, as we might have seen in the video earlier. But anyway, so whilst training for this race, I had an accident coming downhill, fell off my bike, and as we later realized, I'd broken my neck in 2 places. Now, again, God showed his provision, and that this didn't take him by surprise. First of all, there was a friend of ours who's a paramedic, and he, at the time, was about to go on shift for ER24. He had kind of got into his whole jumpsuit and everything else, ready to go. And so when Chantelle phoned him and said, Kevin's been in an accident, we need help. He was there. And in a very short space of time, he managed to get the ER24 ambulance there. He also had an X-Trail, which proved critical in getting me off the mountain and then into the ambulance. And shortly after that, he and his wife moved to the UAE. Now, in terms of that window, if I had had the accident just a little bit later, he wouldn't have been there for us. So we saw God's provision and, again, that he wasn't taken by surprise. The next way in which we saw God in that moment was with regards to the neurosurgeon. So we had, lots of people had asked, what do we need prayer for in that moment when it all happened? And our biggest prayer was just that the medical staff that were attending to us would be the best that could help us, because we knew that it is a very complicated procedure that I needed to have in terms of, I eventually had plates and screws and everything else put into my neck. And God's provision in that moment was a surgeon who was there for a very short period of time. He basically arrived at Durbanville Medic Clinic probably about a month before I had my accident, was there for us during the whole process. And shortly after the end of my recovery, he left and moved to Somerset West. So again, God's provision in that moment. So coming into August 2020, we've now been in lockdown for a period of about 6 months, through all the stresses and strains of kind of reduced pay and all the goings on that we had. And one night, Chantelle was woken with me seizuring. And what a terrifying experience for her. She didn't know what was going on. I mean, at one point, she thought that I died. Like, I stopped breathing, and then all of a sudden, kind of started again. Now, in that moment, the boys were sleeping, so she needed somebody to be able to come and look after the boys whilst we went off to the hospital. Again, it's only 2 kilometers away. God's blessing. And in that moment, the person she thought to phone was Basil. Now, Basil we didn't know this, was in the Eastern Cape, in an area where there was very limited cell phone reception. But in that time was when, as Chantelle phoned, he provided enough signal for Basil to answer the call. And then he duly dispatched Heidi to come and look after the boys whilst we went to the hospital. The next episode or I guess, way in which we saw God's provision was we were, in August 2021, we were in Struisbaai, having a weekend away with friends. And in planning to go to lunch at one of the local restaurants, our friends were already kind of loaded into their car, ready to go. We were in the process of kind of also going up, and Samuel's finger got caught in the aluminium gate that was there. He basically, it cut through his nail, through his flesh, through the bone, so that only his fingerprint surface was intact, and thankfully the blood vessels as well. Now, it all happened very quickly, but because they were already in the car, we managed to get to the GP in Struisbaai within 5 minutes. She duly recommended that we head straight through to the Mediclinic in Hermanus. At that time, the road between Struisbaai and Hermanus was being kind of repaired and that sort of thing, so we knew that there was going to be a huge delay, and would have to go through kind of via the N2 to head back to Hermanus. And God just prompted us that we needed to rather head home. The time taken to do that whole route, we may as well head back to Durbanville. So literally all of our stuff was just thrown into black bags, thrown in the car, and off we went. And God again showed that he knew that that's what we needed. Because Samuel still had to have a COVID test before he could be operated on. Well, they recommended it. Otherwise, the surgeon would have to be in kind of full PPE, and kind of operating on a tiny little finger is not easy when you've got all of that stuff on. And the next day, when Samuel went into theater, he was fast asleep, didn't even kind of realize that he was going into theater. So God's blessing, because we had to kind of wait overnight, but also not having to worry that we didn't have a place to stay in Hermanus whilst all of that was happening, so that we could be at home kind of whilst one of us was at the hospital. So again, if you think that all of our testimony is about Samuel and I making use of our medical aid and our gap cover, you're wrong. God has also shown his provision in the journey of our homeschooling. So for those of you who don't know, we homeschool our 2 boys. Chantelle is a qualified teacher, and both of us going into that journey never thought about the homeschooling scenario. We both grew up in families where we went to mainstream schools, and yet God led us down the way and kind of through interactions with people we realized that this is what he wanted for us. And we have seen his amazing provision in terms of the great resources that we've been blessed with, the friendship groups, kind of a very strong spiritual community, as well as social interactions for our boys as well. And just seeing in every step through that his constant provision.
So I'm just going to chat with regards to the kids that you see us with. So last year at the ladies' retreat in September, for those of you who were there will remember, the talk was about human trafficking. This subject has always been very close to my heart. From the first time I heard about it a few years ago from Christine Kane, who heads up the A21 movement. She spoke at a Hillsong Color Conference, which I attended, and it really has been a subject very, very close to my heart. So after the ladies' retreat, on the way home, I prayed, and I said, Lord, please, there's only so many times you can listen to stories like this and just go back to the comfort of your own home. I'm like, Lord, please, let me make a difference somehow, because it's not okay. Every time I sit in these things, it affects me, and then I go home and get on with my life. And then that Thursday following the ladies' retreat, Kevin surprised me with tickets to go and watch The Sound of Freedom. And that just cemented my desire to want to actually see a change and help make that change. Right. So the following Saturday, we found out about a little girl. So just a side note, when you ask God for an opportunity, he's going to bring one. So make sure that you are willing to say yes when he does. We found out about a little girl who had been abused, and she was not being removed from the abusive situation because there was nowhere for them to take her. She had been in that abusive situation for about a week, and she still had not been removed. I tried to phone. I spoke to police detectives. I spoke to the DSD, which is the Department of Social Development. Helpline, not one of them was willing to help. I said to Kevin at that point, I really think that we need to apply for paperwork to become a place of safety. He reminded me that when we had tried to do this previously, it took 6 months for the paperwork to be approved. He said, Chantelle, what difference is it going to make? I said, I think God is asking us to do this, and then we have to leave the rest up to him. So we did. I went to the DSD in Belleville on the Monday morning, handed in the paperwork, had an interview with them. By the Monday night at 10 o'clock, the little girl was delivered at our home. And that was Lolo, who you guys met at the end of last year. She is now safely with her grandmother, after they'd established that it was a place of safety for her, and she's apparently doing really well. After Lolo, everyone asked us if this is something we do now. We said we are praying, and we really were, because this was a very traumatic experience for our family. She was very traumatized. She was an absolutely lovely little girl, but she carried a lot of trauma with her. And so, fast forward to March 2024, we were planning our 10th wedding anniversary getaway for the first time ever without our boys for the weekend in Solberg. And the day before we left, we got a call from a friend who said, would you guys be willing to take in a little girl into safety care? Your papers are approved for about a week. So she said, I'm not sure where you are in the praying process. So we said we would be willing, however, we were leaving the next morning to go away. So she said that, okay, that's not going to work, thank you very much, but can I pass your details on to the agency because they are desperate for safe care parents? So we chatted it through, and I said to her, that's fine, you can pass our details on. On the Monday morning, we were packing up to come home, and we got a call from the head of this agency, and she said, so there's this little girl. And I said to her, is it the same little girl? She said yes. So the next day, Libor, who's the little girl who's with us here today, she was dropped off at our home. And then That was on the 12th of March. On the 8th of April, I received a message from the social worker who had placed Libor with us, asking whether we'd be willing to take in a newborn just for 2 weeks. Noah arrived that afternoon, straight from the hospital with all his hospital tags still attached. We agreed to keep Noah with us for longer than 2 weeks, obviously. And we are grateful that we can provide a place of safety for both of them while God is working out their futures.
So as you can see, God knows the finer details of our lives, even those that are still to come. He is loving and will sustain us through all the trials that we face.